As we count down to President Cyril Ramaphosa's delivery of his State of the Nation address tomorrow, the agricultural sector is hoping for immediate intervention to relieve farmers of the burden of load shedding. Agri SA is warning that without urgent action, the country's food security hangs in the balance. Let's speak now to Kulani Siweya, Chief Economist at Agri SA. Thank you so much, Kulani, for availing yourself this afternoon. You believe that targeted relief is needed in order to avoid a catastrophe, especially where food security is involved.
Good afternoon, and to your viewers as well. Thank you very much for having me. And yes, as you rightfully point out, we are really concerned about the situation that is playing out, particularly with load shedding and just its impact that it's having on the agricultural sector and thus subsequently trickling over to food security. I mean, if you just consider in the first 9 months of 2022, this is from January to September, the agricultural sector had lost about 23 billion owing to load shedding. Farmers had challenges with just producing their goods and commodities in a sustainable manner. And I think we've also seen in the last week or two where there have been reports of already some challenges when it comes to the retailers. I think it was KFC that noted that they were not getting the supply of chickens that they used to get. And this is just the principal matter and concern that we have across, to say that with the load shedding situation playing out, it really is creating a bit of a constraint when it comes to supply, and ultimately we may see the price of food going up and threatening food security in South Africa.
You've got about 6 points that you'd like to hear from the President. Let's start with the first, being declaring the sector as an essential service.
Yeah, sure. So should the state of disaster go ahead and be declared, we would like to see the agricultural sector be declared as an essential service. And this also just extrapolates from when you saw it during peak COVID period, when the sector was considered an essential service and operations were then able to continue. We believe with this declaration, there'll be certain interventions or certain lowering of red tape around the electricity supply and load shedding. And I think it also speaks to one of our other points where we're asking to be exempted from higher load shedding stages, particularly of stage 4 and going any higher of that.
You'd also like an amendment to the current tariff structure to reduce the cost of electricity during peak times.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, with the tariff structure that is in place right now, maybe just to put context, most of our farming operations, as we know, happens in the rural parts of the country. Now, owing to the fact that this can be considered to be like at the end of the line, with some of the power stations, there's a cost that's attached to delivering electricity to that part of that country. So as it stands with load shedding, the farmers are needing to irrigate and use higher electricity during peak hours, which attracts a penalty or a higher tariff in this regard. But with load shedding playing out, unfortunately, the farmers are then forced to go into the peak season, peak usage time, and not use irrigation systems, for example, during off-peak. And this is exactly, I mean, it's out of the control of the farmers themselves. So they're being penalized while ESCOM is realizing the full benefit of the finances in this regard. So we're asking that the tariff structure be reviewed during times of load shedding to ensure that the farmers are not punished and just to protect the industry going forward.
This is an interesting suggestion. You want the trading of load shedding schedules using a local feasibility study. Talk to us about the tiered model you are proposing.
Yeah, so we have found that in certain regions, you may find that a particular feeder or line may only just be with farmers, or majority being farmers in that particular area. And you find that then load shedding happens during times where the farmers would ideally be wanting to continue with their farming operations, maybe, for example, during the evening where they can irrigate at that particular time. But because of the load shedding schedule, they then find themselves not being being affected during those particular times, and then moving to the peak season. So what we're saying is that in those particular regions where it can play out, that it doesn't affect any other constituents of the economy, then we can trade those particular load shedding schedules to ensure that the farmers continue on their operations at a more efficient time compared to the other thing.
I thought this was quite interesting because you are negotiating. You're not outright saying do this or don't do that. You want the president to allow for higher rebates on diesel, but particularly exempt the agricultural sector from load shedding beyond stage 2. So we'll take 1, 2, and 3. Mara, after 4, no.
And that's exactly it, because we understand the situation. There is a shortage of electricity. The load shedding situation cannot be solved overnight. we're not wanting to be unreasonable with our request. We bring something to the table to negotiate with government to see what is viable to protecting the grid first of all from an ESCOM point of view, but also ensuring that the sector remains viable and competitive in the long run, because we are quite concerned with the situation that is playing out. Earlier on, I noted the difficulty with just the supply of these particular commodities to retailers, but some of our agricultural players have also been experiencing challenges when it comes to cold storage when they have to export. And you can just imagine that with this impact on a global scale, or rather when you have to go to those particular markets, it threatens the 800,000 jobs or so in the sector, because now we're becoming not viable in this regard. So hence we're saying that, look, we're not outright going to be recalcitrant. We're just wanting to place this on the table for negotiations and finding the best approach that is viable on the ESCOM side of things in terms of protecting the grid, but also ensuring that the sector is competitive and viable.
Thank you so much to Kulani Siweya, Chief Economist at Agri SA.